Hello and welcome to the session on I'm not in market research, I'm in marketing. I'm Penny Burke and I'm presenting this session. Now, those of you who know me will know that I started my career in advertising. So my first ever ad was the Stainmaster Pro Heart, Mr. Heart, What a Mess commercial. But I also worked on Not Happy Jan for Yellow Pages, and I've worked on Uncle Toby's and Adidas and Libra and Sorbent and lots of different things. So in lots of ways, I feel like I came out of the womb knowing how to sell. And in fact, even now, I still feel largely more aligned to the marketing community in many ways than I do to the market research community. So when the opportunity came up to think about facing 2030, and I was thinking about what are the issues that we need to come to grips with, I think one of those is our ability to think conceptually to compete 100% with the range of new non-traditional competitors that are entering into our space. So I suppose, where did I really start thinking about this? If we go back 6 years now, I took my kids out of school and we spent 4 months travelling around Australia. And I remember very clearly when we got to the west coast of Australia and we were in a very remote place north of Ningaloo Reef. And we stayed in like a bed and breakfast where there was a communal dining room for breakfast. Now, because we were so remote, we had the person who owned it made her own bread because there was obviously not very many fresh foodstuffs. And she made this magnificent freshly made bread, and it was oversized. So you had this kind of big tall piece and a big long piece. And we went down to breakfast and I could see my then 9-year-old son, and he was over at the countertop, and you could see he telegraphed the emotions on his face as he tried to work out which end to put into the toaster. And so he had the bread bit and he's putting, is it this way, is it that way? And he was clearly confused. And then he looked over at me and shouted over the whole restaurant, "Hey Mum, which way does this go? Portrait or landscape?" So when I reflect on that afterwards, apart from the fact that everybody in the restaurant laughed, when I think about that afterwards, I think, isn't it interesting the way that change happens? And it's actually here long before we recognise it. And so the opportunity for us in conferences and opportunities to discuss like this is for us to try and get ahead of it and start to think about how the different languages and the different way that change translates to us, that we can get ahead of that curve. So I would like to talk today about not a new gadget, not a new piece of technology, not a new marketing research methodology, but just a way of thinking. I want us to think differently for our clients and how we can think differently for ourselves. So they're the 7 key things I'm going to go through today. So the first way of thinking differently for our clients is actually about improving our customer service orientation. Now, ad agencies and non-traditional competitors are really good at this. Customer service is something that they excel at. And so I wonder if when we first get a research brief, I think what often happens is we cut straight to thinking, okay, what's the research response going to be? Are we going to do qual? Are we going to do quant? What's the budget? What's the time frame? How do we go about starting to amass a response to this? And that's a market research response. But I think if you're in marketing, you start to think about a much bigger picture. You actually start to think about how this research is going to be embedded in the organisation. You start thinking about why they're even doing the research. So in this day and age of COVID, I think we've all seen the dollars tightening up. So that means if a client has been able to find a budget somewhere, somehow, that's got to have been improved on high, and people need to know that this research is taking place. So what are they doing it for? What sort of outcome are they looking for? And how can we help best orient ourselves to service the client in the best possible way? I think the second part of a really good customer service orientation that, again, non-traditional competitors are really good at is actually servicing the client throughout the life of the project. So I think sometimes in research companies, from when I was on the other side, you would sort of sign off on the research and then you wouldn't really hear much from the researcher again until they came back to deliver. Whereas other organisations have a really proactive response to customer service. They are in touch weekly, they give updates, they give headlines around what happened in the groups last night. They talk about what early survey findings are suggesting. So the customer service orientation, I think we're going to find that a lot of our competitors are a lot better at it than we are. Now, as with all of these tips, you may very well be doing this already, and if you are, I don't want to tell you to suck eggs. Good on you if that's what you're doing. These are just some thoughts that I've had about how we can improve as we face 2030. So the second thing about thinking differently is about segmenting our customers. Now, we do this all the time for consumers. We think about how there are different clusters that have different needs and respond differently to different things. But I wonder how many of us actively think about our customers in this way. Now, when I was in agency land, there was a lot of conversation and everybody inside the agency knew the certain types of clients that we had. So we know there's one who's an absolute detail freak who will drive us crazy and want every single level of detail. And so the way that we will choose to service that client and the sort of response that we can give them to make them feel 100% confident in our market research and our results and our findings is to give him or her what it is that they want. At the same time, there was always a big picture thinker, an entrepreneur who didn't necessarily want to give us all the details, who could actually be a nightmare, change the spec halfway through field work, so on and so forth. So the way that we need to gear up as an industry to deal with that type of person is different to how we need to deal with someone who is anal about detail. So I think the opportunity for us to really think about how to engage the client and provide the best possible support to them that they individually need, that they can then carry forth into their organisation, is going to be a key skill set of the future. So the third suggestion I have, which is really core to the concept of marketing as opposed to market research, is tooling up. Now I say tool up because I mean taking our IP, instead of just presenting it saying it's a focus group, it's a survey, it's a bulletin board, whatever it is, and building it into a broader package or suite of IP or tools. Now this is something that our non-traditional competitors are really, really good at. And it's something I think we need to turn our attention to more so. Now, I'm going to confess that I too have, had the shits with some of this stuff. So, as an example, if we talk about behaviour change. Now, I am 150% in, with boots and all, with the concept of behaviour change, and it's actually what our organisation, from a research perspective, not only does now, but has always done. And the reason I get sometimes a bit shitty is because even back in the days of advertising, when I was working back then, 20 years ago, I sometimes think to myself, what did you think that we were doing back then, before behaviour change became sexy? So what did you think we were doing, spending millions of dollars in advertising and research only to ensure that consumers did exactly the same thing the next day? The whole concept of advertising and research back then was focused on behaviour change. So it's not a new thing. However, what some practitioners have done is tools it up, and they've actually developed it into IP, and they are, and hats off to them, they are marketing it as a program and as a suite of activities. So I think we need to get much smarter about that stuff as well. So we need to start thinking about how we can tool our intellectual property into programs, schemes, statements of work that go beyond just we're selling you 4 focus groups or a survey. So the tooling up aspect is one of the key things that separates someone who is in market research from someone who's in marketing. My final point around how we can think differently for clients is to focus predictably when we look at our research results on not what they say, but what they mean. And now this is almost a bit embarrassing for us to discuss as research practitioners, because surely we do that all the time. But I certainly have seen my fair share of research reports that pretty much do just say this is what they said. Now, as long as we stay in that position, we are not going to be marketing ourselves. We absolutely need to think beyond that and start thinking around what it actually means, not just for us, but what it means for the client. So what are they going to do with this? What would need to happen inside their organisation? What would need to change? What help do they need in changing that? Who are the people that are going to need to approve this? What evidence or support do they need to be able to make the changes that they have to make? Who are the key stakeholders that are involved in this decision? What could we do to help them? What behaviours would we need to see change in order for these decisions to take place? What's happening about monitoring and evaluation? How can we help with those as well? So again, I don't want to tell anyone to suck eggs, and for those of us that are doing this is terrific. These are just my observations on where I see the difference in mindset between those that come with a market research lens versus people who come with a marketing lens. So that's thinking differently for our clients. What about thinking differently for ourselves? So the first thing I think we all need to do is embrace a broader skill set. We need to be skilled up in a range of different things. In adjacent industries to ours, in being voracious and interested in a whole lot of other areas of interest that we can bring to bear on our clients' solutions. Now, one of the things that I find personally, everyone will have a different point of view, but I sit on a couple of different boards. So once you're approving expenditure on a board, you're also thinking about the business implications of the decisions that you make. So I'm a graduate of the AICD, so I am a Rigid Edge Company Director, and I have found that the experience of being on boards, as an example, has really helped me think differently around the expenditure items that get approved. So that's just one example, but I think there's lots of opportunity for us to embrace broader skill sets. And I'm not saying that just because I think it's a good idea. I'm saying it because when I look at the non-traditional competitors that are coming into our market, as an example, they all have really sound business background and they talk that lens in a different way to the clients. And I think we need to start thinking more broadly in our skill set so that we can contain and continue that same language. So the next one for us when we're thinking about how to think like a marketer is to really get our heads around why us, why now? So when we're putting in a pitch or a proposal or we're trying to win a bit of business, I think that generally the non-traditional competitors that we have are much better at mounting a specific value proposition and providing an offer. And they're really clear about what they can bring to the table and what it is that is different to what other researchers or organisations provide. So we need to do some more work, I reckon, in this space. What is it that makes us different? What is our sweet spot? Rather than just selling focus groups, surveys, bulletin boards, etc., which every other market researcher does, what is it that makes us different? Now, when I sell marketing conversations like this to our clients, we often talk a lot about the analogy of a lighthouse. So I will say to our clients that whenever people come into the beam of the glare of your light beam, that they understand 150% what it is that is being sold to them. And they absolutely sign up to that beam of that glare. And that's the thing that we want to get to. The why us, why now is all about what do we say about ourselves that makes us famous. Now, when we're inconsistent with that, one of the key things that happens if we say, oh, we can do this sort of service, we can do that sort of business, we can also do this for you if you like, and by the way, we're pretty good at this too, is it's exactly like a beam of light. And that is that it dissipates. So we go from a really clear offer to one that is very broad, which is obviously not good. If you're a marketer, the whole focus is on making it as tight as you can. And the marketing view is also that it's better to stand for something than stand for nothing. So yes, it means that there are people outside your lighthouse, and maybe they are better off with a different research company than yours. But the time will come where this type of job is 100% ours to win, and we are the best at doing that. So I think getting really clear on what your point of difference is, your place in the market, and what it is you offer is really a marketing sort of thinking process. And it requires us to be on top of the business, to think on the business, not be thinking in the business, because this is about how we can all position ourselves for a better future in 2030. Now, I'm a big believer in the law of abundance. Even at the moment, I believe that if we are providing the value and to the standards that our clients deserve, there is enough work for everybody. It's just going to make it a lot easier if that work is given to organisations that are really clear about their point of difference. And can I also say that price ain't it? So for those of us that are out there that are pricing rock bottom for the good of all of us, please don't do that. It's not a race to the bottom. How about we all just, rising tide lifts all boats. How about we're all in this together and we're really clear about, for each of us individually and collectively, why us, why now? So the final point that I'd like to make here in terms of how we can help ourselves by thinking differently is to build a bridge and get over it. Now, by that I mean, we are going to continue to have clients that want to do vast sections of research themselves because it's cheaper. They're going to want to continue to use SurveyMonkey. They're going to have less and less budgets, particularly in a COVID lifestyle. They're going to have less and less time when they do decide that they want to finally embark on some research. So I think that we can take two courses of action here in the way that we think about this stuff. We can continue to resist and say that's not the right way to do it, it's inappropriate, it's plain wrong, and I totally get that in lots of cases that will be true. Or we can think like a marketer and go, what are our clients' needs here? Why are they moving to that type of product or service? And how can we think and work with them and adapt to actually fill their needs? Because they're moving towards that because it's satisfying a need. That's what marketing is about. So I think the quicker that we can build a bridge and get over it, the better that we're going to be in better shape to face 2030. The more able we're going to be able to cope with the conversation around portrait or landscape, and the better off we're going to be as an industry. Thank you so much, and I think we're going to be taking some questions.